Right, so good afternoon to everyone, and we're so excited to welcome you to our last webinar of the year. I can't believe it. It feels a little ridiculous. And just to remind myself that it is downhill to Christmas now, I've put some Christmas baubles up for us to have a look at. So yes, it is actually nearly Christmas. It might not feel like it, but we are very grateful and glad that you have joined us. We know it is a little bit busy for teachers, but I have no doubt you will definitely enjoy today. So just a reminder, it is almost holidays and you deserve a little break with something interesting to get the brain working in different directions today. Please keep your video off as well as your sound. It is just, it's easier for streaming, please. We are recording this webinar, so you are welcome to refer to it later again. And for the people who watch it later, we hope they'll also enjoy it then. You are very welcome to ask questions in the chat. I see some people have found the chat, so please use it. Otherwise, Roddy has indicated that there will be opportunities for questions during the presentation as well. So please just listen up and ask if you have anything that you'd like to ask. Then there's a quiz link again at the end, woohoo! And we have an amazing prize. It is one of Rodney's own productions, and you will be the absolute envy of all your geography colleagues if you win this one. So please don't leave until you've got the link for the Google form quiz, and then we'll let you know if you're the winner. It isn't easy. So if you're not a SAGTA member, but you have joined us, please consider joining. There are going to be more and more benefits next year for SAGTA members, and we certainly want you all on board so that you get everything that we have for you. So that is for today. And I would like to now take the opportunity to introduce our speaker to you. So Professor Rory Fox studied geography at Strathclyde University in Glasgow from 1970 to 1976. He received his PhD from there in 1977. He did his first GIS mapping work as a research officer at Sunderland Polytechnic, now Sunderland University, between 1977 and 1979. He was appointed as a lecturer and then a senior lecturer at Kenyatta University, Nairobi, before moving to Rhodes University in 1985, from where he retired in 2017 and still remains in Grahamstown. So since then, Professor Emeritus Roddy Fox has pursued his passion as a photographer, sole proprietor of Roddy Fox Photography, and part of that has been blending his artistic photography and skills with GIS mapping. His career highlights was the Rhodes University's Distinguished Teaching Award in 2004, the Rhodes University Internationalization Award in 2014, and winner of the 2018 WESA Heritage Day Photo Competition and winner of a Standard Bank Ovation Award for Innovation and Excellence at the 2020 National Arts Festival Fringe with the video Lord of Life. Now, if that isn't impressive, then I don't know. Thank you so much, Roddy. It's all up to you now.
Okay. Right. Thanks for those words, Inika. Feels a bit strange being introduced like that, but there we are. Anyway, and thanks for the invitation to address you all. It's great to be back in the geographical community again. I must say I've missed you all. What I want to do this afternoon is run you through a talk I gave. I gave 2 presentations this year. First time I've been at a geography conference for a while, and I was at 2. And I wanted to present some of the mapping work I'd done, because once I stopped being a full-time professional geographer, I was able to let my artistic talents loose, and with a bit more time on my hands and the ability to experiment, I came up with what I think are some really nice, interesting maps and some beautiful ways of looking at things. So that's really what I want to talk to you about this afternoon. I would like to say first, let me just flip. I want to make sure, and you guys can chip in and tell me if the screen sharing is working. Could somebody speak up and say they can see something there?
Yes, thank you. It's perfect.
Okay, thanks, Inika. I thought I'd start with where I'm going to finish, which is an interesting way of doing this. I've put up some free downloads from this talk in my website, my fine art photography website. There's just open one or two of them up. Move you out of the way. Various screenshots. Well, they're not screenshots. They're designed to fit a normal widescreen. They're the right resolution for that. And here's a couple of the rivers, excuse me, of South Africa maps I've done. So I've put those up there. And really what my talk's about, I'm just going into my Africa map section, is about how did I and why did I produce these maps. Now, let me just close that. I've produced these quite dramatic, quite beautiful, I think, maps of Africa river basins. I'm just going to flip through them. Different version of the same thing. The next one looks at the perennial and intermittent rivers in Africa. The next one just is a minimalist map. It's got no labeling whatsoever. It's just the river systems of Africa. And incidentally, as an aside, I'm just getting this one printed at 1 meter square on metal. I was actually dealing with the printer just before we came online. Next one is a sort of silver type image of Southern Africa. Quite a nice image, I think. And then the rivers maps I've done of South Africa, there's one of them. And then for fun, a typographic map of Africa, the natural regions, with one of my photos of a cheetah walking out at you. And then for fun again, a rhino coming out of you, out of a relief map. And lastly, a standard political map, but with an interesting twist, I think. So there's those. I'm just going to stop sharing. Okay, so that's where we're going to finish with, and that's the work I've been doing. What I'd like to do is run through the talk I gave. I gave it to the Geography Society conference and to the SANORD, the Southern African Nordic Region conference recently. And let me try and do this. Both of these talks were quite short. I think I had 11 minutes in one and 12 in the other. So it was a bit like giving an online TED talk, if you like. I had almost no time whatsoever. But I ran through and I put up a dozen or 16 slides. And I want to run through these slides with a bit more time on my hands, talk a bit longer. And let me make that one bigger. I think that's better. Yes, it is. And when I'm about halfway through, I'm going to stop showing you these, and I then want to spend a bit more time talking about how I did what I did and the benefits and drawbacks of the methods I used and so on. And I think I must say at the outset, I'm not a Windows user, so all these images were done on my Mac. I'm not a ArcInfo user. I didn't use the industry standard for that. And I'm not a Photoshop user, so I didn't use the industry standard for that either. So I tend to shy away from the industry standards that lock you into a particular way of working that you can't share in any other way. I'm more likely to be working in an open access or a freeware situation, producing what I do. And that to me has distinct benefits and possibly disadvantages as well. But so you're not going to hear anything about ArcInfo or Photoshop, although I use things very like them. Okay, so I gave a talk on Africa's Rivers, Illusion or Art. Now, a little bit of a justification about that. Well, I don't think I need to labour the point to you guys that water resources and how we perceive them is really important. And as a long-term teacher of development in Africa, one major issue is actually, how do you map Africa's rivers? How do we present this information to students, to colleagues, to policymakers, to the general public. And I can see a whole different range of ways of doing it as a single theme, as conventional wall map, as wall art, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute, or do we just put it out in social media? That's one thing I'm going to be tackling. Secondly, and a critical thing to me is Africa's rivers and streams are frequently ephemeral, and living in Grahamstown, don't I know just that? I don't think our local rivers flowed in the last 4 or 5 years, yet it's there on the map as if it's there permanently. I know full well it isn't. Well, how do we start mapping this to other people so that it makes sense? And the case studies I'm going to look at are the rivers of South Africa, map and project I developed for myself, and the Africa river basins. Those are the two main things I'm going to look at. So, a couple of introductory remarks about conventional wall maps, the grid Arundel map on the left and the classic National Geographic map on the right, sorts of things that we're all used to seeing, but in this modern day and age, I would actually argue they're fairly boring ways of showing us geographical information. They're not really going to be very inspirational in an educational context, and I don't think they're particularly intuitive to someone with a non-geographical training. That, I would argue, is the past in a sense. The future, if you like, is mapping thematically, and the grasshopper geographer Ivan Švuks, I think he's Hungarian, has been very proactive. He was the first person to start mapping and marketing single themes. You can see on the left there the rivers of USA, the middle ones are the forest cover of Europe. I think the next one across is natural vegetation in somewhere in Western USA, and a population map of India. Here they are, single themes, no labeling, no graticules, nothing like that, but very dramatic ways of showing that single idea. And rivers maps are relatively easy to understand. I saw some of the grasshoppers maps, and I also saw some of Sukhmani Mantel's maps. Sukh is a former colleague of mine at Rhodes, and she was interested, her map at the bottom left, the river basins of South Africa. She was inspired by the same source to start thinking of mapping in an interesting way, and then interfacing that with school children, learners at the university, and so on, to see how effective it was as a teaching tool. The rivers maps are all done quite simply. They take Strahler's stream ordering network, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on and so on. And I could see immediately, as soon as I looked at any of the maps other people had done, that they were just choosing different colors, different line widths, different strokes of the pen to indicate the different types of stream ordering. And if you just put that on a black background, it makes a very simple but very vivid and telling statement about how complex the rivers are, where they are, and so on. So a few standard rivers maps. On the left, you can see I didn't want to produce a map like that. I didn't want to produce maps the same as Sukh or the grasshopper geographer. I wanted the maps to be more engaging and more geographically intuitive to me. So the map on the left, with Sukh's permission and collaboration, I took her data and I remapped the rivers, I remapped the basins, I chose different colors, and I draped that map onto an elevation model of the land and the bathymetry of the sea. And then I overlaid the national borders, and then I labeled it. It sounds straightforward, but I can assure you it wasn't, and I'll talk about that in a minute or two. And on the right, I asked the question, is it an illusion? Because the Orange River, the map on the left, it looks really big. It is really big. But if you look at the map on the right, if you map the river regime as to whether it's perennial or intermittent, you're going to realize very quickly that the vast majority of the orange is intermittent as are most of the rivers in Namibia, although I am well aware that earlier this year, a lot of them were in flood. So that's an interesting case study, but maybe I think that's the first time in around 10 years that's happened. And I was really intrigued. How do I map the elevation? How do I put other information on there? And then how do we show people that these maps, these rivers are not there? Surely if I map it just as I've done on the left, it's going to imply that the rivers are there. Okay. Just a quick mention before I stop, where did I get the data from? The data was all freely available and in the public domain, Department of Water Affairs and Forestry, as it was back when I got the data, and when Suk got the data and extracted it, sent it to me, I got that from there. The elevation models were freely available. I think I took some of them from the JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency. And the rivers of Africa I got from the FAO. That's a map there. You can see it's a screen grab from the Rivers in Africa site with the Strahler legend underneath it. And on the right, you can see I got the elevation, the shaded relief data from the Natural Earth website. And again, all of this stuff is free. So I haven't used anything that was hard to get hold of. Well, not necessarily hard, not necessarily easy to find, but freely available for access. And I'm just going to stop in a second because this slide here shows you my process. What did I do and how did I do it? Well, I started off with my data on the left-hand side. I then used QGIS, the open source GIS package, and multi-spec, which you've probably not heard of, to clip the various types of data to get the boundaries the same. Then I imported them into Cartographic, the GIS system for Mac users, and added my own color palettes and mapped the rivers, the relief and the boundaries. And then I went from there and took everything into Photoscape X, which is a photographic package to do the contrast color labeling, map layout and design. Now, at point, I'm going to stop sharing. I've come back for a minute. I'm just about to hop over and look at some of the ways I did everything. But if anybody wants to jump in right now and say something, you're more than welcome to do so. But that's pretty much an introduction. I'm just about to launch into some more of the detail in a second. So if you've got anything to say, just pipe up.
Roddy, it's Paul. Can I jump in?
Sure.
I mean, the maps are visually stunning. I think you've really done an outstanding job with them. And as I was sitting watching, I was just wondering, is it possible to show interbasin transfer schemes like the Lesotho Highlands project on there as well? Would that be something interesting to see and show?
I think you're absolutely right. It would be. I think what you'd have to do, because these maps are already really complex, is one of the problems. What would be a really interesting way to do that would be to choose a color scheme for the whole interbasin transfer. So the Orange River might go like that, and then the same color might come down the Fish River, which of course it shouldn't. But because there's an interbasin transfer, you could map it like that. I'd never thought of doing that, but it would be a good way to do it. Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in? If not, I'm going to assume it's not. I'm just going to jump into the share screen again. Now, let me go to here. This is the mapping package I've been using. It's called Cartographic. It's the only one of the packages of software I use that you pay for, remarkably enough. And because it's designed for a Mac user, which is what I am, and I've been one for 20 years, it's quite intuitive and easy to use, far more so than ArcInfo ever was. And I used ArcInfo from 1990. It's a complicated, clumsy system, in my opinion. It's extremely powerful, but boy, if they went out of their way to make something complicated, they've certainly succeeded. Cartographic, you also pay for, but you only pay for it once. You don't pay for it every month, so you don't rent it. And what it does intuitively and well and quickly. So that's partly why I use it. But anyway, enough of that. Cartographic, I'm showing you here, and this is a little extract from my map. And on the left-hand side, you're going to see I took the FAO's data, and I'm scrolling up the left-hand side, and I manually extracted the, I think it's 13 major sub-basins within Africa, and then within each one, I then extracted the sub-basin, sub-catchments. I didn't go down to the tributary level, and all the names you can see on the left-hand side here, I think there's over 200 of them. There are the 200 or so, 225, I think it is, of the river basins that I went and extracted from the data, and then I went into each river. If I just click on this one, this is the Khantus, and I chose the Strahler field, and then I manually went in and edited the, don't you just, there we go, edited how that river looked, and then mapped it. Again, this might sound quite easy and straightforward, but it actually isn't at all. So I ended up with a map like this. Is all of Africa with 25 different colors in it, with a border and a black background. That's all it is. I wouldn't like to say or know how long it took me to do it. Quite a while. It wasn't an automatic process. I did it manually so that I could select and unselect different colors. I particularly was keen to get different combinations of colors working. If I just go in here, I think you can see I've deliberately chosen a range of colors in this area so that they complement each other, with one or two of them standing out. I was particularly anxious that I did that. So that's, let me rid of that. And of course, all of that I clipped on top of, or I overlaid on top of a hill shaded relief map. And again, it's in essence, it's a simple thing to do, but to get the colors to work on a map that goes from very pale gray to black, for you to be able to see them and see the next one and see where they go. If I'd have known how complicated that was going to be, I perhaps wouldn't have started trying to do it. But I managed. It took quite a long time to do that. Okay, so stop sharing that. So that is some of the GIS work that I did on that. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, and the next thing I'm going to share, all right, is I wanted to, where am I? Yes, I wanted to choose my own color schemes. I didn't want to use an off-the-shelf scheme. I wanted my maps to actually reflect, they need to be nice pastel colors, but I really wanted them to reflect African colors and African color schemes. So I went into the Color Brewer site, which enables you to generate and use your own different color schemes. And I then imported those into Cartographic myself. And the second thing I used, and this comes from my photographic artistic background, I went into the Color Hex site and I investigated different color bands that people had used, and I imported some of those, and then I manually worked on them. So both of those are free as well, which was great. Once I'd mapped all of that stuff, I exported it into Photoscape X, which is my fun and easy photo editor. It's another piece of software that's free, and it's another piece of software you can use on a Mac. You can use it in Windows. Anyone can use it, and for most of the features, there's a free editor. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so you've got the idea that I like using freeware. I like using stuff that I don't have to pay for, and I like using things that you can use on different platforms. That's where I come from. And I also like using software that's low on its demands on my computer system. So I'm using a 3-year-old MacBook Air. It's not a particularly powerful or quick machine. I'm running 2 iterations of Cartographic on it. In a moment, I'll show you the photo editing software. I'm running I think it's a 750 megabyte file in it with about 70 different layers of data. And all of that's running on a laptop, a small laptop. So I'm not a fan of these big applications that just totally dominate everything you do. Okay, so I'm just going to share one more before we go on. Here it is. I'm now in my photo editing suite, Photoscape X, it's called. And here you can see, if I pan around a little bit, you can see I've labeled. All of these labels have been hand labeled. I put them in separately, the labels in the middle. And I think now if I zoom in, I'm going to zoom in to about 80%. I think you can start to see the level of detail I've managed to capture. And the challenge is that you've got is where there's an escarpment, a rift valley, and how you can really appreciate the three-dimensionality of what I'm doing. Okay, enough on that. Questions on that before I run through the next bit? I'm happy to take something.
I actually have a question, Roddy. Your map of Africa, which you showed us, I'm just fascinated. What did you put in over the Sahara? Are those rivers? I couldn't quite see.
That's a good question. They're ephemeral rivers. They might flow once every 10, 20 or 30 years.
Oh, wow. So you've actually put in river.
You're preempting me beautifully.
Oh. Sorry.
No, it's great. It's great. I'll show you in a minute which one of them is a perennial and are always there. It's not very many.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Good question. Okay, anyone else? Then I'm going to go back to, let me remember what on earth I was doing. So there we are. Yeah. Okay, I got to just here where my process was. And I'm just going to run quickly through now. I took my inspiration for African colors from Masai, Kente cloth and Venda. Those are the sorts of colors, got them from Color Hex and Color Brewer, and made my own color palettes. I chose different fonts to standard fonts for the Africa River Basins map. I chose the notorious papyrus font because papyrus to me talked about rivers and was organic and African. You know, I always associate papyrus with the River Nile and stories of the Bible. So the 2 different maps I did have got different elevation in them. The Rivers of South Africa uses an elevation model. It's hill shading for all of Africa, but that's the reasoning behind that. Okay, my River Basins map, and here's a little idea of how I'd like to try and engage someone who knows about Africa with it. It's actually got some latitude, longitude graticules on it, so that you can see where the tropics are, the equator, and so on and so on. And I've labeled the major basins, and all the way around the perimeter, I've labeled a selection of the river basins. And Inika's question, you've got all those rivers in the Sahara. I'll go back. Yes, there are lots of rivers in the Sahara, but they're these yellow ones. They're the intermittent ones, the ones that are usually not there. They're there if you run a model to look and see where water will flow. And yes, you can see that they will flow there, but it's only in the blue areas of the map that you're likely to find rivers flowing year in, year out, every month of the year. And this to me is one of the problems that I had with both Suk Mantell's maps and the grasshopper geographers, is that they map things as if they're there the whole time, and they're not. How to overcome that? Well, you can use an online program called Juxtapose, where you drag a slider across the screen and you can see all of the rivers and then the perennial and non-perennial. Or on the right there, I've shown that you can put an inset map in of permanent and intermittent rivers as opposed to the river basins map. So you can combine that way. How have I made these available? The Rivers of South Africa map, well, you can get that from me. I'll show you one in a minute. And the Africa maps, I've on the right-hand side there in my new fine art photography site. If you wanted to download one of those, they're $15 US for the download. It's the cheapest way to print them, other than getting one directly from me. So that's about 225 rands, and then go and get it printed yourself will be the cheapest and easiest way to go. So if I were to ask art or illusion, I'd like to think I've presented some art, and that
is it quiet for everyone?
is do I go for some form of crowdfunding and try and get some funding initiative going, get a lot of sponsorship and use that to print and disseminate. And there's a thank you at the bottom, because that was the end of that. And I'm going to sit back now because I can say, firstly, two things. Firstly, as Paul's already asked for the download link, you're welcome to access the downloads. Just drop me an email, I'll send you the link. I don't know if Paul's tried to use the password yet. I'd be interested to know if it works. One of the problems you have selling and running your own stuff online is, of course, you cannot go in as a customer. You can only go in as the proprietor. So what I see isn't what you see. So that's one thing. I have, as Inika mentioned, a whole lot. I know this is going to come out inverted to you. Of these, I printed 20 last year, actually printed about 45 or 50. I sold lots of them at Christmas time. I've still got 20 left. If you want to buy one from me, drop me an email. They're 250 rands each, plus postage and packaging of another 175. But if I can move some of them out of my over-congested workspace, I'd be delighted. Okay, that's enough from me. Inika, you can be the ring mistress.
Thank you. Yes, so if there are any questions, I'm going to ask people to pass them along now, but I'm putting the link to the Google form in the chat. So everyone who would like to possibly try and win that, that beautiful map of yours, they must please click on that, and they have until 12 o'clock tomorrow. 12 o'clock tomorrow to submit it. I'm thinking they might need some Google to help them answer some questions.
No, they shouldn't use Google at all, Inika. That's cheating.
I agree with you. We'll see who can answer it without Google. So are there any questions while everyone's just quickly clicking on the link so that they have access to that? Is there anyone who wants to ask Roddy another question? I did notice that Pam said, you'll be surprised, we all use QGIS. So
good. That's all I can say. Good.
Jackie wants to know, what's your next project?
Oh, good question, Jackie. I was mapping project. I've been very tempted to do Australia. Because no, I know Sweden's boring. Australia has exactly the same challenges as here, Inika. Exactly the same. It's a great big continent with one island off to the side of it, and most of it's dry.
That's true.
So I'd be facing exactly the challenges but it'd be a lot simpler because it's got a lot fewer rivers, obviously. So I've been thinking of doing that. Paul's question was a good one. I've also been toying with the idea of doing the Nile Basin and the Zambezi Basin.
That would be interesting. What about South America? Pam wants to know.
Oh, South America would be, in a way, it'd be too simple. I know that sounds. I could try it, but if you'd like to, I'd imagine the number of hours I spent on Africa was up in the hundreds. About 3 or 4 days a week, I'd settle down for an hour or two and extract the data and map another 10 or 15 catchments. And the next day I might spend another hour extracting the data and map another 20, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. And then you find you've actually chosen a line scheme that's slightly too thin when you produce a map that's a meter square, and you have to go all the way back to the beginning again. So.
Oh no. I have a question for you. How important do you think is stream ordering at school level?
I think it's quite important. I don't know if it's taught. I didn't get hold of the syllabus to have a look and see. I think it's important that it's taught because it shows you about the complexity of a river system. And it shows it really simply and really clearly that if you're on a 4th order stream, all the third and second order floods are going to come pouring down and hit you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's discussions about that at school. It has been in the syllabus for a few years. So
sure. Sorry, I was just switching my phone off.
Are there any other questions that anyone has for Roddy? Okay, I hope you all managed to click on the Google form. So are there no more questions? Pam, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm just spellbound. But some comment on the ordering of streams. I think it's a very good way of getting kids to work logically. It's also quite funnel shaped, so it gets them to order things. So I think it's very good that we do the stream ordering still.
Yeah. And Pam, if I could respond, I know my colleague Suk has had lots of responses from students and learners she's worked with and teachers, because the shape of the rivers of the Orange River and the Congo, for instance, reminds people of people's lung filaments. It reminds them of networks that exist elsewhere in nature. So it's enabled teachers to teach sort of across the different traditional disciplines in interesting ways.
That's an interesting perspective. Good.
Thank you so much. Right, if there are no more questions, then we would like to say thank you very much to you for your presentation today. And I agree, I think they're just absolutely amazing images that you have created, and every teacher should have one. So I hope that people will check the email with your email address in it, as well as all the other resources that you've given us.
Sure.
So I see people are putting their email addresses onto the chat. It has been emailed, but can I just type your email address in here as well?
Sure.
Then people can just quickly copy it down if they want to. And that will help them then to just make sure we got that correct. I think that's correct. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So if they need anything, or if they would like to ask you any questions, then they've got your email address as well.
Absolutely. Yep. Go ahead. Be delighted to hear from you.
Well, have a lovely afternoon further, and thank you so much for your time. And hopefully we'll see some of your pictures doing the rounds in classrooms.
I hope so too.
And thank you to everyone else for joining. And while it's a bit premature, but Merry Christmas to you as well then.
Wow.
It's the last time we're seeing each other like on this platform. So
Yeah.
have a wonderful holiday when it arrives. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Goodbye to everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Inika.
Goodbye to everyone.